Okay. Greetings, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to the stream. As you might have seen from the title, we're going through the first chapter and a bit of Thus Spoke the Plant for the inaugural / reboot, shall we say, of the Botany Book Club. So it was just postings on the blog, and then it was posting on the blog with an attempted, just random hair, with an attempted analysis on the YouTube, and neither of those have really been updated for like a year or so. So we're gonna do this. So, new format. Read the book and discuss it in parts here, and as the parts are discussed, a short blurb will be put up on the blog. And after the however long each of these streams are, I'm going to record a condensed version for YouTube. So if it's like an hour or so that we're on here talking about it, then it'll probably be like a condensed, like, I don't know, 10 minutes for what we're doing. Yeah, so so I went through and, alright, depending on how many book reviews and analyses that I do, I'm probably going to change the formatting, because all of these relate to plants and stuff. But, I follow a couple of people on book analysis YouTube who use these and the notes and stuff, and it fits. So, we've got a key up at the front here. So, what is it? For the rainbow, right? We've got pink is kind of philosophy, orange is mental health, yellow is plant care, which so far has not made an appearance. I was flipping through and there's some stuff in there. So, green is ethnobotany, blue is archaeology, which also hasn't made an appearance. The purple is metaphysics, and violet is ecology. So if you look at it, most of the tabs are the kind of indigo purple and pink. So mostly metaphysics and philosophy so far. Yes. The flags are awesome. They really are. And then there's some where it's like philosophy and yeah, exactly. Color coding, super cool. Much a fan. No. Did I put it on sideways? Okay, one sec, guys. When the sticky notes just decide that they want to make friends with the other side of the page and bend everywhere. Okay, there we go. And then I've got these, that it's just regular notepad paper, but it's got Post-it sticky on it, so that's the note attachment mechanism in there. And I tend to make notes in pencil just because you can see that the pages aren't that thick, and from experience, if you try making notes in pen, it will bleed through most of the time, unless it's just like ballpoint, but then it smears to the other side of the page, and it's a whole thing. So, not recommended on that one. Also, I was trying to use the flag thing as a bookmark, completely forgetting that I had some. So, yeah, there's that. Anyway, before we get started, anyone want to share / discuss whatever, or shall we just jump into it? I mean, you're not wrong. Ow, ow. Oh, man. I know it's partly because I was taking notes and stuff this morning, but, like, right here. I find that if I write a lot in a short period of time, then it's like a tension thing right here. Especially if I've been kind of stressed, and there was a whole thing on Saturday, so. We good? Yeah? The phalanges are working? Yes. Okay, we're good. Anyway. Yeah. So, stationary supply stream. Also, regular paper. And a fancy, not fancy at all, really. Just a nice, happy pencil and an eraser. Yes. Okay. So, firstly, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, with the very kind of not so much analysis of the really. So, when you're going through something like this, because it is marketed as scientific discovery and scientific analysis, yes, it is a very happy pencil. We are friends. We are very good friends, the pencil and I. When, especially if it's marketing itself as a scientific resource, you need to take into account whatever biases and potential perceptions the author has. And a lot of that has to do with cultural specifics and the whatever, like, education background someone has, that sort of thing. Just like for any context, whatever your particular history is, it influences how you interact with the rest of your environment. Regardless of what's happening. Now, for Monica Gagliano, who is the author of this, it's come on. It's written as kind of a first-person account of someone interacting with plants mostly on a metaphysical level. And so far we're only going into the first chapter here, which happens to take place in the Amazon. Monica is a research scientist, or who, after kind of a crisis of conscience, if you will, switched from being a marine biologist to a plant researcher. Because, and I have a limited experience with marine biology, because I switched to archaeology before I was really studying it. But that's what I was going to do before archaeology, before Death in the Botany. And apparently, as part of the research that she was doing in Australia, they had to collect and apparently euthanize an entire damselfish colony that had been studied for the last however long, which doesn't make sense, but I don't know. Where's that word? Yeah, that was cool. And she was saying that a turning point for the change in perception was on the last day of the study, when she was going to, it doesn't, especially if it's an open water colony that's living in the barrier, like in the Great Barrier Reef, which is itself a protected habitat. That does not sound ecologically sound at all. As a, wow, okay, one sec. Eyes a bit foggy, that's it'll clear up in a sec. Alright, there we go. And now I can see. Alright, here we go. But yeah, now, she's a professor at Southern Cross University, the University of Western Australia, and a research affiliate at the University of Sydney. So, that's the background that we're going with. Also, from what I've seen at least, each of the chapters is going to an indigenous community and interacting with the plants in as close to the traditional methods that the community uses as possible. It's also of note that in doing that, Monica is Australian and white. So, something to keep in mind. Just because sometimes that does impact how someone interacts with the communities that they're going into. It's not written in here that that is an issue, but the focus isn't on the people involved, it's on the plants. So, something to keep in mind going forward. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Which, I would really like to see what people from, indigenous communities and what people of color, have to say about this. To a degree, some of what she's saying in here kind of goes along with some of my own experiences with plants, but when you're bringing in discussions of like ayahuasca and shamanism and things like that, it can get a bit shifted on that one. So yeah, one of those that it's interesting, but that's a potential lens with the cultural appropriation. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, one sec. Okay. We're good? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Trying to adjust the pop filter and it's trying to fall over, so there's that. We seem to be okay now. Alright. Yeah. So, with that set up, we'll move on. Also, I haven't... Yeah, I haven't seen in here. But if she's from Australia, the Aboriginal tribes of Australia have a very long, very storied history with plants and just the spirits of nature itself. So I'd be interested to see what kind of interaction that would produce too. Don't know if it's represented in here or not, but yeah, there we go. So going into the foreword, the notes that I've got is basically most, if not all, really, cultures speak of a strong connection between nature and forests in particular and humans. It doesn't work for everyone, but often going outside to take a breather, as it were, has a multi-pronged benefit to a person's body and mind. And more recently, there's the idea of forest bathing or something like that. Essentially, going into a green space and just being for a while. Because if you just let yourself relax into it, then you tend to breathe deeper, and if you're in a green space and you're breathing deeper, then you're intaking more oxygen, and it helps to clear your head and all the rest of it. But yeah, a lot of what's in here, yeah, Shinryoku, yeah. I'd forgotten what it was. But yeah, no, that I would have to check that out because I do have access to Amazon Prime Video. I forgot about that. Yeah. So a lot of what's in here is prefaced by was it? Quote, the book asks you to open up to the possibility that plants have some of the same senses as people. The ability to hear, see, smell, feel, and taste, along with distinct modalities, new dimensions, to make sense of their world, such as detecting electromagnetic field sounds and low voltage vibrations. Unquote. Okay, so nice. So living things emit an electromagnetic frequency. It's a thing. So it makes sense that different living organisms can detect the electromagnetic frequency of other living organisms. That is also a thing. And at its base, most interaction can be connected to that in some way. But yeah, that's that. process. Here we go. Seriously. Oh, yeah. Water break, guys. Water break. Because water is important for humans, just like it's for plants. Yeah. With the finger guns. Alright. So. I'm back to this. What is it? So, there's a long a long tendency, really, for humans to, at least Western, humans in certain Western societies, to see plants as just kind of existing as, like, inanimate sort of objects off in the distance, really. And what's it? Yeah. So she writes, Okay, so the foreword in here is written by Dr. Suzanne Simard, professor of forest ecology at the University of Columbia. So, what's that? Writes, from the superiority complex, the idea that thank you, honeycomb. From the superiority complex, which is like that humans are above plants and animals and whatever else. We have justified the global abuse of plants, and not just of plants, but of any creature we consider inferior to humans, which means all species, which, for most of Western society, of course, not all cultures have this anthropocentric superiority complex, but the most dominant and powerful one on Earth today does, and has created multiple crises on a global scale. Okay. Which one was green? Okay, now it's the ethnobotany. Averting socio-ecological disaster will take a scientific revolution. It will take a deconstruction of our reductionist and parochial approach to understanding life and the invention of whole new ways of understanding the world. So, paradigm shift, essentially, is what we're going with here. And then it's saying, You need to, quote, tear off your lifetime of cultural blinders and open all of your senses to let in the world of plants. Which, fair enough. So, yeah. Basically, nature is a multi-dimensional thing, and humans are part of it. That's all. So, anyone have anything else from the forward part before we move on? Oh, yeah. One sec. Okay. Alright. One sec. Let me see if it's actually mentioned back here. No, it's not. Okay. Let me see. Alright, guys, do you remember which page it was mentioned on? Because I'm seeing the mycorrhizal fungal networks. Was that what you were mentioning? Okay, yeah, no. Just, no worries. Just because that's the only mention that I'm saying of a network in the forward part. So, okay. Sounds good. 1 second, and we'll get right on that. Okay, how do you can't spell mycorrhizal with a Y. That's not. Yeah. That's why it didn't work. Is this? This looks promising. Seasons simmered, right? Okay. Alright. So. I think this is the one that she was mentioning. There's a few different ones. And it looks like there's a video too. I don't know that it's from the same person. But wait. No, maybe? Apparently not. Maybe. Can we see the full article? Maybe. We can. We can indeed see the full article. It's kind of a lot. Okay. The artwork for this, though, is on point. I will say. Okay. So let's go back here. So for the abstract, right? We've got interplant communication through mycorrhizal networks mediates complex adaptive behavior in plant communities. Alright, so the abstract for this. Adaptive behavior of plants, including rapid changes in physiology, gene regulation, there we go, and defense response can be altered when linked to neighboring plants by a mycorrhizal network, or MN. Mechanisms underlying the behavioral changes include mycorrhizal fungal colonization by the MN, or interplant communication via transfer of nutrients, defense signals, or allelochemicals. We focus on this review in our new findings in ectomycorrhizal ecosystems, and also review recent advances in arbuscular mycorrhizal systems. We have found that the behavioral changes in ectomycorrhizal plants depend on environmental cues. The identity of the plant neighbor and the characteristics of the MN. The hierarchical integration of this phenomenon with other biological networks is at broader scales in forest ecosystems, and the consequences we have observed when it is interrupted indicate that underground tree talk is a fundamental process in the complex adaptive nature of forest ecosystems. So basically, in order for forests to work at their best, the plants communicate in some fashion underground. Which makes sense, because that's where the nutrient exchange is. That's where the root systems are. Where above ground you have space, essentially. And below ground, in order for multi-species, multi-individual systems to function, they all kind of have to have some kind of communication strategy in order to coexist. Even just at the base level of, like, not position markers, but what's that? But, like, periphery sensors, I guess, kind of the same as a truck that's backing up has the lights and the beep beep beep, like, so that you know that it's gonna be there, that kind of thing. Yeah, fungophones. Fungal phones, yes. And then we've got this, and I'm just gonna pop both of the links in the chat. We're not going to get into the full article right now. That might be a thing to investigate later. But the first link is just the abstract. The second link is the full article. So there you go. Oh, no. Where's it? Okay. So here we've got an illustration of the process. So there's the resources that get transported: the carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and water. Okay. Okay, so the receiver condition. Okay, alright. Yeah, okay. So the receiver is the sink, or where something's deposited, essentially. It sinks into, so the sink. shaded, nutrient deficient, drought stress, transportation demand, defense response, or it's smaller and younger. So if the plant is in distress, shall we say, that would be the descriptors. If it's the donor, then it's the source, it's more illuminated, nutrient enriched, it has enough water, it's not debilitated by predation, it's probably an older tree, older plant, and of a more sizable nature. So it has more to be able to give. So for this, it's a more established, healthier example, assisting one that is not as well established or is fighting an illness, what have you. So that's what we're working with here. Behavior responses, germination, growth, survival, foliar nutrition, so the foliage, defense response, photosynthesis, allochemicals, and micronutrients. So the things that would be assisted, and then the receiver donor identity would be the species and genotype. So yeah, and then we've got, so with all of that taking into account, the resources transported would be the carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and water, because it's the nutrients and the hydration. And the molecules transported, we've got defense signals, would be jasmonate and methyl silicate, the alleochemicals, theophanes and gigolone, and herbicide, which would be transported between the mycorrhizal root systems. So, okay. Alright. So, there is that. There. Now, what's this? Is it gonna make me sign into something so that I can look at it? Because that's always fun. No. Well, yeah. So right now we're waiting to see if the New York Times is going to let me see whatever interesting things about plants and tree communication is being advertised. Yeah, so far I'm not seeing anything. Okay, yeah, no, let's just exit that. Okay. Let's see what this has. The social life of forests. trees appear to communicate and cooperate through subterranean networks of fungi. What are they sharing with one another? Okay. Okay. So is this... Yeah, so it looks like this is about Suzanne. Okay. Oh, yeah. And for this, we've got an example of a large interconnecting root system. So, that's cool. Okay. Yeah. So, it's an interesting article. It looks like there's an option to listen to it in an audio form. So we might venture into that at a later point. But for right now, get back to get back to this. But yeah. Okay. Cool. So that seems to be kind of an overview analysis of the person who did the foreword for this, with bits of ecology and whatnot thrown in. So, anyone have a further something, or are we good to venture into the prelude? Let's see. There we go. There we go. Okay. The corner of the laptop was right under the mic house that I developed over there. So, like, if there was an audible, that's what it was. Alright, so Prelude, I don't have many notes for that, admittedly. Mostly it's like there's a common theme on the interconnectedness of different spheres or sectors of planetary life, meaning plants and humans, plants and animals and whatever. Everything's connected and impacts everything else because ecology and how the ecology operates, basically. tabs did I use on this? No. And part of it is I'm glad that I have the tabs, but like the purple one here is almost impossible to actually see through, and the rest of them it's like transparent. So when I've used that one, I have to actually concentrate to see what's under it. So for this little section, it's got, what was it? I marked it as ethnobotany, metaphysics, and ecology. But what does it start with? Okay. So integrating science and experiential botanical research. Let's call it that. Quote, takes place at the frontier where the physical world, as we think we know it, and alternate domains of reality, weirder than we can conceive of, meet. Here the ordinary and the peculiar go hand in hand. Right? That's what it says. Hand in hand, yeah. And at times bump into each other to set a whole world alight with new, even paradoxical possibilities. End quote. And this is also part of the issue that you see with cultural fieldwork. With fieldwork with cultural anthropology, if it's something that's not like calculable, I suppose would be the best term, then it's a bit harder to kind of analyze, if you will. Okay, one sec. Mostly, really, for that, a lot of cultural anthropology and human experience and things like that would fall into the subjective category, if it's subjective and objective. Objective would be something that is provable. It has hard data that can be put into a formula and replicated and experienced in that manner. If it's subjective, then it's not hard data. You can still analyze it, it's still valid as data information, but it's not necessarily replicatable. It's generally something that's reported, something that is based on more feeling than hard evidence, shall we say. Which is kind of expected when we're dealing with humans that are emotive creatures. Rather than strict chemical equations or mathematics or something like that. And if you're looking for proof of something, that's when it gets kind of weird sometimes. Because what is proof and evidence for one person isn't necessarily for somebody else. Mostly because it's experiential. And when you have something that depends entirely on your perceptions and is going on in your head, essentially. Okay. Like those times that it feels like you're gonna burp, but you don't. Yeah. There's a lot of times where something feels very real, but your perceptions of the situation, your perceptions of reality, your reality itself might be altered, might be shifted, might have any number of things that you're the only one experiencing. And that's a lot of what's happening in here. So, that's also something to keep in mind when we're going through it. And that's not to say that the experiences being detailed here are not accurate or are not what the author has experienced. It's just something that you need to keep kind of in the back of your mind that is part of the narrative, shall we say. So, there is that. And yeah, here we go. Okay, so oh yeah, and yeah, the Prelude is where she's talking about the I keep wanting to call them angelfish, and they're not. What is it? What is it? It was right there. Damselfish. There we go. Yeah. And it was, I've heard it from other researchers, where if you're in an environment for long enough, the wildlife just kind of accepts you as being part of the ecosystem. Like, you're there, you show up, you look at them, you take pictures, and then they just go say hi because, yes, the strange whale, or the seal that wears flippers, like, oh, hello. And you become part of... Is that the phone? Okay. You become part of the world that exists in that kind of microcosm. And it's interesting, just coming from someone who was doing cultural anthropology before the ethnobotany, right? Before I was adding plants to it, it was just the people and how different people groups interact. In cultural anthropology, there was a long-standing narrative that in order to analyze and best describe what's happening in a culture, you had to remain outside of the culture as an external observer, which is part of where, like, the disregard isn't the right word, but disdain, I suppose, where the disdain for someone going native on an expedition comes from, because then it's the outside researcher is adapting to what the locals are doing too much to remain objective in what they're doing. But if you're working with people, there tends to not be an objective experience anyway. It's all somewhat subjective. It's just a matter of putting in at the start, like, if you're working on a thesis, if you're working on a paper or a book or whatever it is that you're doing, as long as you put in at the start what your bias is, then it's fine. And a lot of the best cultural analysis works, the savage native racism shenanigans. A lot of the best discussions of culture come from a combination of the internal community and an external view. Because then you have what it looks like from the outside, but also what it means to the people actually living it. And that's the most important part anyway. Because if you have what it looks like and what it feels like and the experiential components from within the community, then having whatever it looks like from the outside doesn't really matter. It just adds another layer to the whole. but that has been ingrained in culture and anthropology for the last at least 150 years, to the point that the armchair anthropologists, the armchair archaeologists, like, that's kind of where a lot of it originated. So, yeah. What was I gonna... Okay, yeah. And coming at it from that, if you're an outsider who is welcomed into a community, whether it's a plant community or an animal community or a human community, and you are trusted by that community, you're being let into something that is sacred. And especially if it's kind of a closed tradition or a more restricted tradition, a local something. There's times that you have to weigh the continued protection of your group that you're now a part of and whatever the research is. And a lot of times, especially if it's a protected bit of knowledge, you're being brought in because you're trusted. That doesn't mean that you can then go and publish whatever it is, because you don't have ownership of it. You've just been allowed to read the pages, if you will. You don't have the clearance to publish the text. You just got to look at what it says. And it's... that's kind of the same feeling, really, that I was getting when I read some of this, right? Because she's saying that as part of the marine biologist research that she was doing, she would go daily to the reef, to a particular part of the reef, to work with the damselfish. And after a while, she was there, and they would just swim up and say hi, and she could recognize them, and they were individual fish. They had a particular habit in their habitat, and she'd become part of the habitat. And was trusted by those in the habitat. Just like there's stories of Jane Goodall and really any primatologist who's been working in the field for an extended period of time, really, who, after a time, the chimpanzees or the gorillas, whoever it is that is being documented, gets used to the person being there, is comfortable with the person being there, so long as that's the relationship that's cultivated, and relaxes. But then you have kind of the catch-22 of, if the native populace, whether it be and I realize that the biological cultural anthropology and biological anthropology, cultural anthropology, and marine biology have similar themes. I am not suggesting, even remotely, that people in indigenous communities and wildlife are in the same category. Just putting that out there right now. But that is the especially if there's a language barrier. That's what I'm trying to get at. Especially if there's a language or communication barrier because there's cultural differences or what have you. There's a progressive trust that you have to cultivate regardless of the community that you're trying to interact with. That's all. But yeah. Just thought that was interesting, because in here, it's kind of painting. Right, shocking, I realize. It's like, I was going down the train of thought and like, right, no. I'll just head this off at the pass. No. But it kind of had an almost like I don't know. Not a very good vibe, shall we say. Where it's like, this community that I've now become heavily involved with, that trusts me implicitly. Oh yes, and now I've decided that the study is over, so they will all die now. But but she was conflicted about it and went down to see the reef, and none of the fish wanted to go talk to her because reasons. Now, in here, she's talking about how she was conflicted and they knew that she was going to do this thing and thus avoided her. And to a degree, yeah, okay. What we know of marine animals, and this isn't something that's mentioned in here, but marine, yeah, exactly. That's from a cultural anthropology perspective, which is what I tend to come at everything with. That's what I was looking at it as, and it's like, no. No, that is bad. We don't do that, no. With they're replacing the damselfish with humans, and ooh, goes downhill real fast. But what we know of aquatic marine animals is that they're very susceptible to changes in tension in the water, movement in the water, any kind of sound transmission in the water. And I'm not saying that in this particular scenario that's what was in play, but especially because I am not in any capacity an expert on the damselfish, but just as a thing, right? If you are in the middle of an internal conflict, if there's something that's like a tension thing happening, then you tend to be a bit more jittery. You tend to behave in a slightly different manner. You're giving off kind of a nervous tension energy. Which, yeah, the stress chemicals. Exactly. And even if she was covered in a wetsuit, there's still, like, a bits exposed to the water. So between stress chemicals, vibrations in the water, small changes in behavior, all of that, plus any number of other factors, would have had a negative response from the fish. Because that is not the behavior of the calm, chill person that they were used to interacting with. So, all of that is something to keep in mind. There. So, yeah. And then she goes on to describe this. Yeah, exactly. If what she failed to take into account is that, like, it's not just that the fish know that she was there to harm them. It's like you're acting kind of weird, probably. Like they're just there vibing, and you're being kind of different, so, like, they're just over here, and it's kind of the same thing as, like, your friend who's usually really chill suddenly shows up and is just like, ah! So, you just kind of let them sit over wherever they are until they seem to have calmed down a little bit, and then you go talk to them. But that doesn't seem to have happened in this situation. So, I don't know. And then, this is being referred to as a phytobiography. So, a biography of plants, essentially. Written about plants by plants. because she's interacting with plants and then writing the story. Writing the stories, the accounts, etc. So, yeah. Alright. So, there is that. Yeah, exactly. Like, same here, honestly. Okay, so, one sec. That is the foreword and prologue. So, now it's, I mean, I know it's, in the text, it says that it's an unpronounceable, what is it? Unpronounceable word that humans can't understand or whatever, but I'm pronouncing it, Oringam. Yeah. So, Oringam? Oringam. There we go. Just because. Right. So, we're at that point. Just managed to stab myself in the elbow with, a blunt bit of wood, so, fun times. Oh, God. Alright. Oh, yeah. And remember the water. Okay. So, anyone have other insights from the prologue, or shall we just move on to the actual chapter? And just as a thing for going forward, yeah, there's graphs in the next one. Alright. For the ones past this, it's obviously just going to be that chapter. So, well, there is that. Yeah, okay. So it looks like there's going to be a lot more about plant growth and stuff in the next round. Alright, so we've got Oringam. Yeah. Where is it? Okay. So, in the story that she's saying for this one, Oringam is the plant's way of saying thank you. And she finds this out during an Ayahuasca excursion, shall we say. So, there's that. Okay. So it means thank you. In this context, it's thank you for listening to the plants and what the plants have to say. I thought I stretched enough, and apparently not. Ow. Okay. Alright. Let me just add it in. Okay. There we go. Alright. So, in that, okay. Right. Gotcha. So in this, it essentially starts with our author being in Australia, having a sleep, and then having a strange dream where she's approaching a hut in the forest somewhere, and it's dark. It seems to be a reoccurring dream. The first time there's a jaguar that emerges. The second time there's a boy or a young man in the hut tending a fire. The third time there's an older gentleman tending the fire. And they seem to be in Shipibo dress. So, the dress of the Shipibo people. Singing songs, asking her to sing songs that she didn't know the words to, but the song came anyway. It doesn't say how she went from having a dream to how she went to Peru. But if you have access to the internet, you can kind of look up indigenous dress and find certain similarities, so there might have been something to do with that. I know there's been times that I've had interesting dreams and I've looked up parts of it and, yes, there's that jogs the memory, okay. But it's not discussed in here, probably because it's not immediately relevant to the narrative of the plants talking to her. I don't know. But it's a missing part in here that, as someone who has done research in things, having the entire timeline is valuable, even if you just say, from this time to this time, I was using Google or something. Yeah. So, this, we've got... Where is it? There it is. So, yeah. Again, we don't know how or particularly why she had dreams. But there's a running theme in here that the botanical world chose her, for some reason it's never explained, to essentially be the mouthpiece of plants. Which again, from the cultural appropriation side of it, and cultural integrativeness and things, there are a lot of people who have an indigenous background who are also scientists. So, yeah. I can appreciate using the white privilege that exists to further what people are working on, or to work with folks to have information more accessible, more recognized. But some of the phrasing in here, I don't know. But yeah, so we don't know exactly why she was called, shall we say, to go to Peru, but upon being in Peru, she meets Sakoba, who if y'all have been around for even just this stream, you know that pronunciation is not my strong suit sometimes, so bear with me. Balako Caspi. Caspi? Balako Caspi. Or with the scientific name, Hematanthus Sakoba. Okay, yeah. So, Sakoba is a tree that is, at least this particular tree, it's about 35 feet tall and has highly fragranced white flowers. So, let me see if I remember. There we go. Okay. So, Balako Caspi, yeah. And there's a whole lot of local names. So, the fruits, seeds, and leaves are used. And she's she talks about how as part of a ritual to communicate with the tree, with that particular species of tree, there's a process, and in the process, she was taking in part of the bark. Yeah, it was like a tea made of the bark, and she was taking in part of the bark for a couple, like, each day for a couple of weeks. And was, as part of it, she was supposed to be getting communication with the plant, and didn't see anything, and then when she was sketching something, there was an image of red with black lines through it, and got some variant of the phrasing, was it todas las cosas están llantas? The YJ in Spanish always messes with me, so I believe that's how it's pronounced. Or translated, all things are connected. Going further, it would be all things are connected through blood in this capacity. And then she knew without knowing, which is always an interesting phrase to use in something like that, which the way that she says it, it's I knew without knowing, and then later went back and did research and confirmed it. And I realize that if you're on site, if you're on location in a remote community, you don't necessarily... One second. You don't necessarily have immediate access to, like, other research materials or what have you. But again, there's potential phrasing issues with that. But basically, and also there's like it's never really discussed if it's just for one part of the recounting or if it's for the entirety, but she's writing this 6 years after being there. Just the like the philosophical unknown thing with the knowing without knowing, but knowing that it's accurate when you don't know that it's accurate, or you know that it's right, but you don't know why that you know that it's right. And it's, if you phrase it as intuition, or you phrase it as there being particular cues or something like that, then it has then it has a different perception, I guess, than how it's phrased here. That's all. But also, there's a lot of things that are present in traditional indigenous communities that are, or seem to be, directly related from the botanical and animalian world. There's things that there's things that I do, that I work with for stuff that's directly related from the botanical and animalian world. Like, it's just, I don't know. Oh, why? I'm just gonna not put the cat back on this, and we're good. Yeah. Okay. So, basically, what I was trying to say is, what the plant is saying is that everything's connected with blood. And that particular plant is used in the community, has a relationship with the community as a blood cleanser. And the no worries, honeycomb. No worries at all. And the scientific research kinda supports that. So this is the usual uses and dosage for bellicoscopy. So it usually relieves pain, reduces inflammation, kills bacteria and fungi, cancer cells, heals wounds, prevents ulcers, aids menstruation, and cleanses lymph glands. It also reduces fever, coughs, cleanses blood, and expels worms. And it's usually a 1 cup twice daily decoction of bark, or capsules, or tincture, however it's being used. The bark and latex both have a long history and are part of the Peruvian herbal medicine systems, especially with the Shipibo Canibo Indians of Peru. Come on. There we go. So, and yeah, so dream communication. Yeah, the tree latex has healing properties, and in this round at least, Don M is the shaman, and from everything that is being described in here, it looks like she's an apprentice shaman, which it depends entirely on the community, but generally you wouldn't have an outsider, in my experience with groups, you wouldn't tend to have an outsider be given the opportunity to train to be a shaman within the community, so something to keep in mind. If anyone else has a different experience to that, let me know. I would be glad to have a chat about that. Yeah, so, where is it? Oh yeah, and just like with the phrasing and stuff, some of it's kind of odd, a little bit. Some of it is really poetic and very descriptive. So we've got one that's quote, "It is at the skin that the tree and the shaman meet, a crossroad of sacred offerings where a wound is etched in the body of one to heal that of the other." End quote. Which is a really cool perspective on it, because in order to harvest the healing properties, whether it's leaves or flowers, seeds, roots, bark, whatever, you have to essentially cause the plant some kind of injury, because you're cutting off part of its being. And in doing that, it's assisting, and there's an energetic transfer, because it's kind of the energy can't be created or destroyed. It changes forms. Multi-dimensional things. And then because it's, I don't know how much is because it's marketing itself as a scientific resource, or how much is just because there's a lot of sources, but there is an entire section of endnotes, which is fascinating and really cool. So, to go with that one, we've got, when the leaves of Himantha Sakoba are broken off from their stems, and when the stems are broken from the branches, a milky white fluid material, latex, is exuded. Wounding the tree bark will also exude the latex. The latex of this tree is a popular natural remedy in Peruvian herbalism, and its long-standing use for healing wounds was verified by Peruvian researchers in an animal study published in 1997. Entitled Evaluation of the Wound Healing Activity of Selected Traditional Medicinal Plants from Peru, published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. Himantha Sakoba is one of more than 20,000 plant species from 40 different families that produce latex. Despite its ubiquity, which attests to its biological significance, the function of latex in nature is not fully understood. It's most likely used by the plants as part of a defensive mechanism against herbivory, such as the delivery of anti-herbivory compounds to rapid wound healing. Which is cool. That's very cool. So, yeah. And then we get yeah, okay. So, and then she goes on to talk about Don M., who was the Maestro Vegetalista, or the plant shaman for the local community. Who kind of guided the author with what she needed to do for stuff. Okay. Which, interesting. Don't know why it'd be in Latin for that, though. So if it's Planta Maestra, Maestro Vegetalista. Well, yeah, no, that'd be in the Spanish too. So as part of the plant-human communication, where the plant is the teacher, the human is the student in this. There's a process that kind of is meant to open the dialogue there. Where, one sec. There's a process that's meant to, like, open the dialogue, and make it easier for the human to talk to and with the plant. And this is one of the ones that it depends on the community and how people interact with those outside of the community as to how much you can reasonably put into your documentation of your experience of what's going on, of whatever. Because then she goes on to describe the dieta, or dieta, I believe. It's essentially the diet, because there's a decoction of bark from the tree that is drunk, and what's it? And then the person going through this process needs to be in isolation, observing total sexual abstinence, and having an unseasoned diet of vegetables and rice. Which I'd forgotten about it, but if I remember right, one of my friends was going through either that process or something similar, but with rose, a couple of years ago. And I don't remember if she'd gone somewhere and, like, if she'd gone on a retreat or something and received that information, or what, but we were at a conference where there was food, and she couldn't add anything to it that would have a more pungent flavor than the rose. And it was kind of I think it was a powder, a powder form of rose petals, I want to say. So yeah, there's a long series of interactions, shall we say, with that. So, I don't know. Right. Also, as part of the lead up, as part of the ritual readiness, I guess, Um, there's... And she never says if it's music for the trees, if it's plant specific, or if it's the local language that's being sung. But a couple of times she says that Dawn M was whistling one of the strange tunes that was the same kind of tune that was being sung in the dream. Yeah. But yeah, so as part of the preparation for the whole thing, Mapacho, or jungle tobacco, Nicotania rustica, is smoked by the person overseeing the process. But yeah, so there's that. Because the Mapacho is a potent variety of jungle tobacco, or natural jungle tobacco. The smoke's considered of utmost importance for its role as the mediator between the shaman and all other plant spirits. Which, yeah, makes sense. For details on the preparation of the various forms of tobacco and their uses, ritual, medicinal, and otherwise, in South America, as well as an extensive bibliographic reference. And then there's a few other sources in there. As far as the dieta, I know I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but yeah. If I'm pronouncing a Latinate word, it ends up defaulting to Latin, unfortunately, or Italian, so. Alright. During such a process, the dieta, that the student learns how to connect with the spirit of that particular plant, which will instruct him or her through visions and songs. In the Western world, this kind of shamanic work is often equated with the use of the psychoactive herbal brew known as ayahuasca, which, side note, ayahuasca is both a plant and a mix, just like curry is both a plant and a mix. So, something there. Also, I do have a book that's just on ayahuasca, that I want to do something like this with too. I've just been holding off to try and find folks with a, direct knowledge of how the plant interacts with people to have that discussion with. So, there you go. So it's not just me, the white person, talking about plants. Yeah. All vegetalists or plant shamans are adamant about the crucial importance of the dieta and insists on the fact that the real work of becoming familiar and sensitive to the spirit of the plants and their teachings takes place during the isolating period of the dieta. Because of this, Attending ayahuasca ceremonies alone will not take the student far. Yeah. And then there's multiple articles cited in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. Most from the mid to late 1980s. Okay. Okay. What am I doing? Oh, yeah. And I kind of jumped forward a bit on this, admittedly. But, no. Caught up. So, she writes about Sakoba, the Bellico-Caspi tree. Quote, she regulates the numbers of red blood cells and oxygen-carrying hemoglobins, deficiencies of which lead to anemia, and maintains healthy blood pressure and the permeability of blood vessels, which makes her a potent healer of several inflammation-related diseases ranging from simple hay fever to life-threatening sepsis, atherosclerosis, and cancer. Which, okay, cool. And then we've got a lot of perceptions of nature kind of go back to early philosophy. And you have the dichotomy of plants as teachers, or plants being wise oracles, but also being essentially inanimate objects at the same time. Which where is it? Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna have to look at that. But apparently, there's a discussion of Plato's Phaedrus in Michael Marder's The Philosopher's Plant and Intellectual Herbarium, which just sounds fascinating as a thing. Where Socrates declares that trees could teach him nothing, but then reminds the readers of prophecies uttered by old oak trees. So, yeah. Well, Is that? Ah, there we go. Yeah, okay. And then we go back to the blood being a connector and a transmission of knowledge and things. And how the tree is discussing without words and showing how she's aware of how the human body works and how its particular dysfunctions happen. And it basically comes down to oxygen and breath. Because, what was it? Because red blood cells are packed with hemoglobin, whose job it is to trap oxygen available in the lungs and transport the atoms into the tissues of the body. So, from what I'm saying, it's the idea that the oxygen is being tracked, almost. And it's essentially, what was it? We breathe each other in and out of existence, one made by the exhalation of the other. Because one, especially if it's a human-plant relationship, one breathes out carbon dioxide, the other intakes the carbon dioxide and releases oxygen, and then that one breathes in the oxygen and releases the carbon dioxide again. And it's a continuous process. Quote, with every breath then, the plant knows the human as herself. At every breath, the human becomes more plant-like than he realizes. And given the right circumstances, he recognizes how he, too, knows the plant as himself. And all of that is taking place in a dream sequence, from what it looks like. So in the Western metaphysical tradition, for example, and this is again in the endnotes, Aristotle philosophized over the existence of the soul from the ancient Greek push, or the breath of life, as that which makes an organism at all, and the idea of a vegetative or nutritive soul that epitomizes plants, but it's also present within all animals, including human beings. You can find in Aristotle's nested hierarchy of souls, hierarchy of soul functions in books 2 and 3 of De Anima, or On the Soul. Okay. Okay. what did I write for this? Ow. What am I doing? Oh, yeah. And this is another kind of the subjective objective data situation, right? Quote, well, it is true that when we try to think of it, okay, so in this context, it's, oh, yeah, right. Let's go back a little bit. Perceived through the veil of motionlessness, even by our most brilliant minds, this plantness has seemed inaccessible and even deliberately hidden from us. Well, that is true when we try to think of it. It's because of its unthinkability, in the sense that it cannot be comprehended in a conceptual way, that only the experience of feeling it, by virtue of the patterns of information that it delivers, makes it real. When we feel it, this plantness is allowed to emanate unconcealed within us at all times. What appeared to be intangible, an obscure otherness, is unveiled as the intimate familiarity of an obvious and luminous likeness. And basically, it's yeah. It's one of those, the plant doesn't know what water is, it doesn't ask what water is, it doesn't have an idea of what water is, but the water is there and the plant absorbs it and interacts with it anyway. Which is an interesting setup. So, the plant exists in a state of open communion in which the fiction of personalized boundaries collapses. So, from that, it's basically the best way I can describe it is on kind of an atomic level, almost. Because we're talking about energy transfer, basically. And knowledge transfer as part of energy transfer, from what it sounds like. And if you go small enough, if you look at things on a detailed enough level, everything's just kind of vibrating at a certain frequency. That's why things are solid. But there's still a permeability there if something drops or raises frequency. And it allows for kind of interaction across frequency boundaries. Admittedly, that's not necessarily my region of expertise, but I have done some research and study with it for, like, personal info stuff. So, there is that. Okay. What do I have still? Oh. Okay, so, because we see everything through the lens of our own experience, right? Just by the parameters involved, it is going to be somewhat skewed regardless of perceptions and personal anything, really. And regardless of how much you acknowledge and take into account your own biases. But also, okay, what is it? Because the openness of plant being, that feels awkward. Because the openness of plant being constantly invites our openness to being humans, our encounter with plants confronts us with the limits of our capacity for such embodied listening and active participation. Thus, plants come to represent the marker points for our resistance to transcend our narcissistic and anthropocentric propensities toward exceptionalism, a necessary requirement for entering such a space. So basically, plants being how they are, it makes you question your own perceptions and your own biases and how you interact with your environment. And then she goes on to talk about it a couple of times, that in the process of going through all this, started to doubt her own sanity and potential for delusions and everything else, which it's good that she put it in there, because a lot of times people tend to not. There's this odd desire to keep the veneer of certainty and an emphatic belief that you totally always knew exactly what you were doing. Yeah, so, yeah, sure, yeah. But putting in, like, the self-doubts kind of it doesn't make it more scientific per se, but yeah, exactly. It's a kernel of self-doubt in a sea of certainty, which is an interesting mix, especially for the subject matter. One thing, though, that I realize that for some, it might be of benefit. However, as part of one of the journeys, if we'll call them, that she's undergoing with her plant teacher, Sakoba. Did I write it down, or am I just gonna wing it? I don't remember. One sec. Oh, yep. Oh, yeah, okay. Also, the author recognizes and acknowledges potential perception issues, but the reader still needs to be aware that she's writing from the perspective of an external white person temporarily living in the Amazon with the locals, but removed from the community because she was called by the trees. Somehow. Okay. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So, just resituating because the knee is doing things. Okay. So, there's a part in here Exactly. Like, why? Why? And like, what's it? Yeah, especially if you're going into it from the perspective of a scientist who's wanting to experience a local custom or document a local practice, which is what it sounds like she's trying to do, at least, but also not at all. It's a weird mix. But if you're going into it from that, then you talk to the people who do whatever the practice is. At length. And if you're allowed, you work with the plant material and you look at the plants themselves, and you might analyze the recipe components. I don't know how much leeway she would have gotten. I have no idea. That's not my realm of expertise. Mostly because I'm not from the region. And a lot of communities are very protective of the ayahuasca and general psychoactive materials and rituals and things like that. Exactly. Like, if they know you're an outsider, which obviously, and if they know that you're there for research and personal growth, which is what she was doing, presumably, unless that's not the narrative that was discussed, which is a whole thing in and of itself, then that's the lens that you go in with. I don't know if it's because I've never been able to just eat something that someone hands me and not ask those questions. But it seems like a no-brainer for that, you know? For today, no. Yeah, for today, we're gonna stop it at the end of 1. But yeah, next week it'd be chapter 2. There is this one bit though, right? Now, I'm glad that the message was beneficial. Yeah. The funny thing is, this is one of the ones that I wanted for my birthday last year because it sounded so fascinating, and it was like people talking to plants and the plants talking back, and it was like, wow. Yeah. So, yeah. Next week, because there are some good bits in there, even with all the salt. So next week it'd be that. For chapter 2. Alright. So, I'm glad that this was of benefit for the author, right? But there's this little bit in here, right? Where she's talking about what's essentially a hallucination. Where she, the author, is going down a corridor lined with all the people that she's met in life. And there's a line here, right? Where the tree teacher says, "See those you thought were out to hurt you? They played their assigned roles with great perfection and infinite patience for your benefit alone. Their choice was made out of love alone, and out of this love, all agreed to be part of your play." Like, there's basically, at least how I'm reading it, is that it's saying everything ever done to you was done out of love, which has potential to be of benefit for some people, but also has a real high potential to be rather damaging depending on a person's lived experience. The idea that a person is the star of their own play and everyone else around them is just acting their parts, on the one hand, you can look at it as everyone is the main character in their own narrative, and everyone's storyline overlaps, so you're the main character of your own story, and it's an empowerment thing because something like that. But on the other hand, that's the kind of thing that I remember giving me an existential crisis when I was in high school. Because then, is anyone's lived experience actually real? And if you combine that with the fact that, if I remember right, she was in the middle of an ayahuasca trip at this point, it's like, no. No. Yeah. Yes, highly potentially triggering content with that, so, and at that point, even if that's what your plant friend said, which is interesting because there's repeated mention in here that the plants don't use actual language, it's just, like, a vibe or something. I know for me, whenever I've had interactions with plants or animals, it's always been imagery. It's not been words. So if that's the case, there's no reason that she would have needed to phrase it like that. So, like, I don't know about the, ooh, yay, yeah. I just read back the little bit. So, yeah, if you can find the Russian research bit, let me know. That would be super cool. Yeah, Yeah, honestly, at, at this point, I went into it going like, oh yeah, this would be super cool. And now it's just kind of become like, so, here's the problems. I don't know about this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which, honestly, that's why I wanted to read this thing. Because, like, it's like, oh, it's a person who, you know. uh, yeah, no, there's, I don't even know if it's still there, but there's a large, or there was a large oak tree between the anthropology and building and the library at the University of Kent when I was there. And apparently that one really does not like smoke. So, you know, from like cigarettes and stuff. But we had a nice couple of chats under there. It was very grouchy. Just in general. Mostly because there was a bench right under the branches that a lot of the students like to sit on and smoke. Was very grouchy about that. Okay. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Uh, okay, one sec. Let me see. And then just at the end here, that's another issue that I was having. It goes from her being in the Amazon to being back in Australia and essentially phrasing it like she was the merging of the what was it? Where's the phrasing? Where is it? Merging of the apprentice shaman and the Western scientist, where I know there's people from indigenous communities in the Amazon who are scientists. Partly because there was at least one of them in the program that I was in. So like there's I don't know. Like I appreciate the enthusiasm and wanting to learn and gain the knowledge and things, but like the methodology, I don't know. There's bits there. Um, quote, 18 months later, so 18 months after she returned, from the sounds of it, this integrated perspective gave birth to the first of a series of scientific studies on plant behavioral ecology, which provided clear experimental evidence for the existence of communication channels between plants beyond those recognized and studied by science up until then. Which, pretty sure there was at least some, prior to that, but, yeah. So, that is it for chapter 1. Yeah. Yeah, who are true, yeah. Right. The publishing thing, honestly. Alright, so that is that. Now, come on. There we go. And just pop it in here. Yeah. Alright. So, there's that. Okay, so that is the first. Come on. That's the first chapter down. Initial reflection is that it's kind of a mixed bag of completely unscientific vibes, essentially, and some scientific analysis, but it seems like it's the experiential, anecdotal part, and then going back to analyze it with science secondarily to potentially corroborate what was experienced. Which can work in certain situations. I don't know if it's working with this. But then that's how I've done stuff too sometimes. It's just not on that scale with that, It's more like one of those, I saw a thing. It felt interesting. And then go to research what it is. So, yeah, basically. it has very much a colonial anthropologist vibe that where the person is only really interested in one certain aspect of what the culture does, not the culture itself. And not even really the plant itself, or the ecosystem that the plant lives in. Just that one thing. Which is very one-dimensional, and kind of sad, to be honest, because it's such a fascinating, integrated place, especially if you're in the Amazon. Like, it's so awesome. But yeah, no, seriously, totally want some, like, super sassy peeps for next week. So we'll see what happens with that. 'Cause I don't know about you guys, but, like, so far at least, I have not seen evidence of a remarkable journey of groundbreaking scientific discoveries. Just saying. But yeah, so there is that. Yeah, there's that. There's one. Well, there's a few particular reasons. Yeah, exactly. There's a few particular reasons why I never volunteered to go to the field school hosted by two of my professors in Ecuador. Like, they did direct work with one of the tribes in Ecuador and Peru. But if you have mobility issues, like a knee that doesn't want to work half the time, and dietary restrictions, fieldwork is perhaps not the best of options. Especially, because they apparently a couple of years back, and taking into account that the last time I was in those classes, it was 2010, but a couple of years before that, they'd gone down with someone who was vegetarian, and apparently, especially in indigenous cultures, food is very much a community thing most of the time, and a hospitality thing, and if you snub someone's hospitality, then it's kind of a big bad. Very rude. So they had a random vegetarian student who the entire time, instead of eating whatever everyone else was eating, was sitting there trying to make falafel? Like powdered falafel things? Somehow? From packets that she brought with her. So therefore, any vegetarian and vegan students were banned from going for the rest of time. Yeah, the giant flying cockroaches would be a potential detractor for enthusiasm on that one, shall we say? Yeah. I can see how that would be a bit of a no for that. But yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, basically, yeah. And especially if you're used to not being able to eat something, like if you have really bad allergies or are just used to not being able to do whatever it is, like I've lost count of how many times I'm going to some kind of party situation and know that there's going to be food there, so I eat something before going, and then the people there are all like, wait, you're not having food? Like, well, I can't eat it, dude. And then the off chance times that there is something that I'm able to eat, it's always so shocking. Like, when I was, for the anthro stuff, gluten wasn't an issue at that point. But there were a lot of vegetarian and vegan students in the anthropology society. And that was the only time that I could actually, like, just walk in and, oh yeah, I'll have some of this and some of this, and oh, that one's got cheese? Okay, yeah, I'll just avoid that. That's fine. Like, oh, but it has eggs. No, that one's okay. I can do eggs. I just can't do the vat of death over here. But you had to get the thing that said vegan. Well, yes. Because then I know it doesn't have milk in it. Which, honestly, if gluten is an issue, then I might need to avoid corn, too, because the proteins behave similarly enough. But it hasn't been an issue so far, so we'll see. I don't know. But anyway. So, that was a fun, if ranty, 3 hours. Wow. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, how long is the corn one? Okay. Me too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, corn and wheat proteins are similar enough that if you have a gluten sensitivity, depending on how bad it is, sometimes you have a corn sensitivity too. And I hadn't realized this until I was reading something. It happened to be a fan fiction, where one of the characters happened to have a gluten sensitivity allergy situation. But I hadn't even registered it, but if you have a corn sensitivity, then you might also have a reaction to chicken and eggs, because chickens eat corn and chickens lay eggs after having eaten corn. So, if you have a gluten sensitivity, you might have a sensitivity to eggs and chicken too. So, there's that. At which point I need to keep an eye on how stuff goes. Thank you for the 100 bits, Honeycomb. That's appreciated. And the salt. Yes, I am glad that there is a salt thingamabobble. Yes. I'm gonna try and see if I can... I don't know how... my nail is weird. I need a file. Ugh. When you go to scratch your leg and then all of a sudden mess with things. Makes sense. Makes sense. One of those things that, Granted, I haven't eaten beef for a good decade. And there was other stuff happening when I was, so I can't really track it, but that would be an interesting one to look at. Because I know for me, it's the milk protein. Because I seem to I seem to have a reaction to proteins, weirdly, so there's that. But yeah. I'm gonna see if I can figure out how to do a trigger thing that does a it's not an emote. The only time that I've seen it used is on Scarlet and Cranky's streams, and Magic too, where you do a command and then a thing pops up on the screen. We'll see if I can figure out how to do that and have some kind of like salt situation thing. Yeah, a gift trigger situation. So we'll see if I can figure out how to do that. Because then, even though we don't have a salt emote, that would be something, and it would be cool. And with as salty as I am about the first chapter of this thing, especially because I was going into it all like excited and stuff, with as salty as I am about this, I need a salty gift trigger situation. Because, come on. Yeah. So, anyway, it's 8 o'clock here. I need to go have some noms. Do we want to do a raid? Or do we want to just sign off and say goodnight? I don't know. What are y'all feeling? Also stretching is good. Ow. Remember to stretch, friends. Ah, yes. And if you aren't... what was that? If you aren't already familiar with the... good plan. If you're not already familiar with the plantness and things, we're over there, yeah. There's links to the 2 YouTube channels, both of which will be updated shortly. So, yeah. Let me just get... Come on, dang it. I want to load the thing. Is it gonna let me type? Maybe. Maybe it is. I don't know. Is it gonna? Thank you much. Thank you much indeed. Alright. Now. So, thank you everybody for hanging out, being party to the super salty, there we go, come on, the super salty, discussion time around this guy. It's available in audiobook format. It's available, I'm pretty sure, in ebook format if you want to read along. It's obviously in physical copy. Thus spoke the plant. We're going to be diving into chapter 2 next week. And we'll see what that's like. Yeah. And there we go. Alright. Thank you much for hanging out. Y'all are awesome. We're going to go visit Bean. And if you would please copy, one of the raid calls, commands, messages, there we go. One of the raid messages hanging out in the chat right now. That'd be awesome. Thank you much. I will see you all later. Have a fabulous rest of your evening. And we'll be back Thursday, if not before. Thank you much. We'll be back Thursday, if not before, for the Botany discussion time. And and then again next Monday for chapter 2 of this bunch of shenanigans. So, until then, I will see you next time. Have a lovely, super fantastic rest of your day, night, whatever time it happens to be for you. So, I will see you later. Bye now. Ba-da-ba-ba. Ah.